And good morning, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode is officially live. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. Joining me today is a Cover One legend. His name is Mr. Anthony Prohaska, and he is going to help me talk about this really tumultuous week in Buffalo Bills 2023-24 season. So thank you all so much for being here for this week's episode of Under Review. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, thank you all so much for being here. And as I stated before, I am joined by one of my favorite recurring guests for this show, Mr. Anthony Prohaska. How are you doing on this fine Saturday?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me. It's nice and it's a little cold out here in Buffalo today, but the sun is shining. I got the windows open. It's actually kind of nice. I appreciate you having me. I'm always excited to join you anytime I can and talk ball. Plus, you pronounce my last name correctly, which is always awesome and a nice little bonus for me. So, I'm pumped to be here and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. How do people normally pronounce it? Do they say like ha, or do they say
Yes.
like
That one? I get ha, I get ha, I get huh. So Prohaska, and it's gotten to the point where like I used to correct. I'd be like, no, it's Prohaska, and then I'm just like, yeah, it's whatever. No one's gonna remember anyway.
It's whatever. It's pro whatever. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's literally it. Like if they get it right, I'm like, oh, it's always like a nice little feather in someone's cap for me, like in my mind. But if they get it wrong, I'm just like, whatever. I hate this.
I'm big on names. I'm big on pronouncing names correctly and spelling them correctly when I have guests. So like when I wrote your name for a feature, if I do anyone's name with the featuring in the title, I like triple check that I'm spelling it correctly. Cause like the last thing I want is a message of being like, it's actually spelled like this. And I'm like, no, like I messed it up. But
my last name is actually pronounced Smith. And it's like none of those letters are even in your name.
I completely made up your last name, but no, thank you so much for being here, dude. I'm really excited to talk about it with you. I mean, what more can be said about what really has transpired the last few weeks, but really this past week? It's, putting it as bluntly as possible, it was really disappointing. I have been someone who has kind of been waiting for that turnaround and has been kind of hoping that this team can figure it out, despite the fact that it's been ugly and there's been some really bad trends despite the data looking good at the same time. That Denver game was that game where I had said, and many people on this network had said, they lose it, we're in trouble. And that's putting it nicely. They lost it, we're in trouble. And as a response to that, they fire Ken Dorsey. Joe Brady is promoted to the interim OC. And really, it has been just a very interesting and frankly tumultuous week during the season. So, Anthony, let me just hear your thoughts on just the whole firing and promotion of Brady, like really your whole outlook and idea of this whole situation.
And this is going to sound like cold and callous. I'm happy that Ken Dorsey is gone just from the perspective of I'm so tired of the conversation and everything just centering around it. Like I had criticisms of Ken Dorsey starting in like early October last year, but things got so out of control. And I got to the point where I was just so frustrated with him being used as the low hanging fruit, cure all blanket statement, blame for everything that would go wrong. Like, and the amount of time, and I understand there's something to be said for setting your players up for success and setting your teams up for success. And that's something like we're going to talk about at some point today. But just the amount of Josh Allen would make a horrible decision and a horrible throw, and everybody would be like, well, because Dorsey broke it, like it's still Dorsey's fault. And it's just like, oh, like, so on the one hand, I'm happy to not have to deal with that conversation anymore. But it's just been, like a really weird ride offensively for this team and really for the team as a whole. Like sitting here at 5-5, the injuries that they've had on defense in terms of the amount and to the players that they've had, like it's not only just like they have a bunch of injuries, they have a bunch of injuries to really important players at really important positions, which then plays into the offense because you had this really complete football team. Then the defense starts to falter because of the injuries. More gets put on the offense. The offense is super inefficient and looks great, but they're also like not doing great at the same time. Things don't match people's eye tests, which doesn't match the data. So people are throwing data out the window and then just trusting their eyes. But by trusting their eyes, they really just mean they're trusting their emotions and their feelings. And it's just been this giant ball of madness. And like you said, it culminates with that Denver game where Dorsey gets fired. And my only gripe or biggest gripe with the Dorsey firing, one, I don't think as much as he got blamed for everything, I don't think it was as much obviously he's culpable. I don't think as much was his fault as it gets made out to be. And the other part was of all the games for him to get fired after, like the one where there were some good schematic things, but individual player execution, like with the drops and the turnovers and the 12 men and all those things, I was like, really? After this game is the one where we pull the trigger? But I understand the notion of it. Like, you got to try and do something to jumpstart that side of the ball or the team as a whole. And there is something to be said for, things trickling back up towards the top or trickling down from the top, however you want to look at it. But yeah, it's just, that game was so dumb. Like, just imagine how deflating it is. Like, if they win the toss, they take the ball because they want to make a statement offensively. And then the first friggin' play that gains like 7 yards is a fumble. And then that's cool. We're going to go right down and drive it down their throat on the next drive. And they do. Gabe Davis drop, and it goes right to Justin Simmons interception. And then the next drive, it's like, cool, we're going to make it back. Nope. Dalton Kincaid's going to drop a pass on third down that would have gotten you a first down. Also, Stephon Diggs is going to drop a pass later. I was like, there's something in the water. This team is snake bit. Like, I don't know what's going on. And man, it's been wild to be sitting here where we are right now at this team at 5-5, worrying about the playoffs, offensive coordinator firing, all the injuries on defense. It's gone away that I don't think anybody really anticipated for this team this year.
100%. And I think that when you talk about those, if you want to call them unlucky moments, if you want to call them execution errors with James Cook, Gabe Davis, in a vacuum, I can forgive Ken Dorsey when players are frankly, just not executing. And when I had watched that game and when they lost that game, I looked at who I was actually blaming, in the moment, because obviously you change your perspective after data and the film and everything comes out. But in that moment, I look at it and I'm like, I really don't think Ken Dorsey in this game, play calling wise, was the biggest problem, right? Because again, multiple drives that, well, I can't say march down the field because Cooks only was one play, but they get down the field with Gabe Davis. They have a couple of big explosive plays, and then those pivots to the run were really nice and ended up gashing Denver's running defense. You're marching down the field at will. You get into the red zone. You score when you need to go to you score when you needed to go ahead, which was very clutch. However, I think, and like you said, and you alluded to this, it matriculates from the top down. When you talk about execution errors, and I have been, someone who blames the player too, I think when I'm seeing a trend that's spanning over the course of 6 weeks, 7 weeks, like a ton of games, especially winnable ones that you drop because you're just seeing this out of sorts, off rhythm, tempo not there from every person in this offense. And I'm not even just talking about Josh Allen, but I'm talking about your skill position players. I find that to be problematic towards the coach. And when I'm seeing penalties, when I'm seeing miscommunications that ultimately lead to early timeout usage, I'm also going to start at some point putting that on the coach, because I think fluidity, cohesion, the ability to kind of get everyone in place when they need to get in place, and being able to kind of create a game plan and a script where people aren't thinking as much, which I know we'll talk about more and you guys have alluded to, where they're not making those errors because they're not thinking. That's something that I'm going to point to coaching. And when I watched that Denver game again, while yes, they did go ahead, yes, there were some pivots, it also is kind of something that I have felt was a problem with Ken Dorsey, which is waiting to catch up to the game versus being ahead of the game. You see the pivots happen late. They don't happen when they should happen. And, as an OC, it's hard to predict what a defense is going to do, right? Adjustments happen. Like that's the game. But I have felt that some of the better minds in the league have always been able to keep an offense ahead of a defense, vice versa. Ken Dorsey felt like he waited for things to go wrong to truly start making those adjustments. And I think that was just a byproduct of being a second-year play caller. And to me, I kind of have said this question, and I'll ask you this, Anthony, but like we know that Dorsey is gone now, but like Did you really think that the Bills were going to want to wait to see Ken Dorsey figure it out and get his wings in this league and kind of, compared to contemporaries who have been veteran play callers, ultimately find out like what he's made of while this team has all this talent?
Yeah, I think they were kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop in a positive way. Not to mention like his experience with Allen and the team, and not being like handpicked by Allen, but receiving a ringing endorsement. Like Allen was very much like, no, I want this guy to be the offensive coordinator. And I also think there's something to be said too for, I don't want to open up this can of worms because so much has been made of it, but there's something to be said for all the positive data surrounding this offense. There's a reason why like national analysts and pundits, some are like, oh no, Ken Dorsey's great. And some are like, no, Ken Dorsey's bad. Like it's been this weird mixed bag for this offense. And I do think there's been successful pieces, and so much for this offense has just been drive stalling out, or, big plays that have hurt them, whether it's turnovers or a bad penalty or a poor decision. But if you look at them on the whole, they really moved the ball well. And I think McDermott or this Bills organization for a lot of the year was just like, well, at some point it has to turn in a positive way. Like you're just waiting, because there was a lot, for as much maligned as this offense was, whether it was Josh Allen or turnovers or Ken Dorsey, for a lot of it, literally, and I know you can say this for so many teams, if you just change literally 2 or 3 plays for this Bills offense, they're all of a sudden like, I don't know, what are they? They're going to be 7-3, like right now, or you're sitting there at 8-2, like just a couple things here or there that you tweak. And I think when you have that combined with the track record that this team has, you're sitting there thinking, you know what, it's going to get figured out. Things will be okay. But obviously not. And you kind of just needed to jumpstart something, because I think you made a good point. It's something that I spoke about on Twitter and spoke about this week. When you just have those consistent execution errors, if you have them in a game or every once in a while, it's like, well, a player screwed up, things happen. But when players are consistently screwing up in some form, then it's just like, okay, at what point is this kind of coming from the top and we have to do something about it? And I think that's just where it got to. But yeah, I think that's an excellent question to ask. Like, and again, I think that's reasonable. This team, everybody kept being like, at some point it's got to turn at some point. And it's just been like, okay, like we're 5-5.
Yeah.
It's November. I think we're past that at some point.
Yeah. 100%, man. And like, I have been one of those people who I'm looking at these games and I kind of look at a couple of issues. And I said this last week, like it is definitely not a one person issue. It's not a one coach issue.
No,
I
it's
know
a
you agree with
of
that.
it. Yeah.
It is a plethora, a vast wasteland of woe, if you will.
I like that. A cornucopia of woe.
A catalog of misery. But when you talk about everything that's wrong with this team, I mean, it is cause and effect. And I looked at that Denver game, and where I felt like the comfort to move on Dorsey was, again, I'm watching Sean McDermott's defense that's insanely injury-ridden, get terrible field position, and still manage to hold the Broncos to 6 points in, I think it was 4 or 5 drives at that time. I can't remember the actual amount. Playing really well. And yes, did they go ahead? Yes. But 3/4 of that game, you're inconsistent, you're sloppy, you have execution errors, and then all of a sudden you put that one drive together and that's fine. But like, it's not enough. And frankly, there's, like you said, 1 or 2 plays that if they go a different way, then this team could very well have 7 wins. It shouldn't have to be 1 or 2 plays that affect the outcome of your whole season, because this team has consistently won games by a touchdown or 10 points. And I know it's not realistic to expect that every game. I don't want to sound like hyperbolic in sense that they should blow every team out. But when you see that the margin of error is getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and you see that the offense binds themselves to a point where they have to have panic drives to go ahead versus control versus the execution to be able to have these scoring drives in the first half and not turn it on in the second half when your back's against the wall, I think that that's an issue. And I'm glad that at the very least, we get the opportunity to see Joe Brady. We'll move on to this next topic. And I've seen people in the comments asking questions. We will get to your questions, I promise. But see Joe Brady get this opportunity and possibly right the ship and have it go in a better direction. So, Anthony, I'm going to pose a question from our chat from who asked this question? Phil Benz. And he says, do you think Brady will have designed rollouts for Josh? Do you think they will reduce the use of shotguns significantly? So I'll let you take the reins on this question.
Oh, the rollouts is an interesting question. I think that ties into how much. I think that ties into the second question too. Of do you think they will reduce the role or the use of shotgun significantly? Joe Brady in his time, and granted, his time at LSU when he was passing game coordinator and receiving and receivers coach was different than the kind of offense that he was running in Carolina. Some of that is obviously tied to Matt Rule and what he wanted, and then obviously them clashing heads and Brady going out. But Brady was really known for being kind of like a spread offense kind of guy, 5-man protections, putting everybody out and spreading teams out and attacking them. And with that, there's going to come a shotgun. But I wonder, given the success that this team has had from an under center nature and what they like to do, I think those are both two really good questions. And I don't know. I don't know what, because the kind of offense he ran in or at LSU was different than what he did in Carolina. Carolina, he had, if you're adding it all together, like those heavier personnel packages or those pro personnel packages, adding them all together, like he ran a bunch of 12, 21, and 22 personnel. But granted, now is that who he wants to be in the NFL? Is that what Matt Rule wanted? Was it based on the personnel that they had and what he thought he could lean into? But knowing what he is at his core, he likes the spread offense. He likes to run spread concepts. He likes to get matchups horizontally and vertically. The biggest thing that I would expect for Joe Brady, like the biggest change or biggest question for me is really what he does with the running backs. Like his time at LSU, his time in Carolina, he was very adept at getting running backs involved by design from a schematic standpoint. Like the reason Clyde Edwards-Helaire became a first-round pick and everybody thought, oh my God, I can't believe the NFL let Clyde Edwards-Helaire fall to the Chiefs, was because of what Joe Brady did for him in that offense by design. And then you look at what he did in Carolina, and I know people are immediately going to say like, oh, Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey was banged up for a ton of 2020 and a ton of 2021. And he's the reason Joe Brady was the reason backup running back Mike Davis was super fantasy relevant, because he was having Mike Davis running these angle routes and just getting him open and one-on-one in space and what he did. So I would look for that. I would look more for schematic pieces from the running back standpoint in terms of who he gets involved. But I think that question there from Phil is super spot on, because if you're leaning into his LSU territory, no, they're going to keep running shotgun a bunch. If you lean into more of his Carolina Panthers work, you could see them reduce some shotgun, go more heavy personnel. Like you could see more Reggie Gilliam and more heavy and more under center in that. It's really going to be an interesting piece to see what he leans into this first week based on what he did in LSU and then how kind of different it was when he was in Carolina.
Yeah, and I want to reference a really, really good tweet from Ryan Sullivan, also on Cover One. He was on the show a couple weeks ago. So he went in and found that Carolina Panthers tendency chart and what they were mainly running. So I'm going to read it verbatim. But for Joe Brady's play calling tendencies in 2020 specifically, he did 11 55% of the time, which was 19th in usage rate, 19th in success rate, 12 18%, so 19th again, 20th in success, 21 8% of the time, 12th in usage, 6th in success. I apologize.
I'm so glad I didn't read I have these all in my notes. I'm glad I did this for my show Tuesday. I'm glad I didn't read them. I would have stolen a bunch of your thunder.
It's all good, man. I didn't even preface because it actually just clicked in my head that he, like, when I saw this tweet, I wanted to reference it today and I somehow didn't have it pulled up. So I had to bring it up. 0 1 6% third in usage rate, 15th in success, 22 5% third usage rate, 18th. And then he threw it the fourth highest rate out of 11 personnel, used motion at the 7th highest rate, used play action at the 25th highest rate, and they were 16th in offensive DVOA with a roster that was basically dudes. So, I mean, you get this impression that it is going to have some very significant variations to how Ken Dorsey's was kind of static in a way. But I do wonder, and I'll ask you this question, how much do you think they really can implement in such a short week, especially against such a good defense coming up?
I think it's tough to implement any significant changes in a short week just based off the short week piece. But then also just in general, like you're at the 11-week mark in the NFL. The offense is, for all intents and purposes, like you said, like there's going to be variations. There's going to be tweaks from Joe Brady, but I would expect to see them more in terms of formations or personnel or people. Like maybe he loves Deontay Hardy, maybe he loves Reggie Gilliam, and so you see their snap share go up. But for a lot of it, like what the offense is kind of going to be what the offense is to a degree. Again, you'll see tweaks and variations, maybe different play call sequencing and situational go-tos, but given where we are in the NFL, like in the NFL season, I should say, you're not going to be able to uninstall and install a new offense. I think the bigger change potentially, we'll see what this team looks like coming out of the bye week. That gives them more of an opportunity to kind of get a sample size of what they've been these past couple of weeks, and then what they could be going into the bye week, and then obviously tweaking that and coming out. That's a big thing for NFL teams in general, like course correcting and self-scouting in that bye week and coming out and just being a beast. The Detroit Lions are a great example of what they did coming out of their bye week last year, and it really led them to success down the stretch. So I think the bye week is where you could really potentially see some more changes, but even then, it's still, it's hard to uninstall and reinstall. I saw this comment here from RJ. So RJ says Brady loves motion. I don't know how much he does, though. So he had a 54% motion rate in 2020, which was 7th in the league. He had a 45% motion rate in 2021, which was 16th, which was kind of just like middle of the road. And then him saying that alone, I hate to do this because RJ hates Ken Dorsey and we go back and forth, but he says that alone will help this offense and Josh at identifying and confusing the defense. Ken Dorsey already uses motion to identify the defense and identify coverages, and it hasn't helped Josh Allen a bunch. Like, so there's a difference between motion being used to identify coverages and identify the defense versus using motion for like space and leverage. Like, there's a difference with how Ken Dorsey used motion versus how Mike McDaniel uses motion, for example, and creating space, creating leverage, exploiting it, taking those pieces. Like, and I know the Bills didn't do motion a ton in like the Dorsey era and in the Dorsey times, but I thought they used it enough to I'm trying to pull the numbers on it right now to confirm what is in my brain. But they did use it to a degree to like help identify, and I want to see more motion from the perspective of using it to create leverage and space and being able to attack off of that. I think that's the key. It's not just, having motion for the sake of having motion or having it to identify defenses, which is still helpful. I would like more motion from the perspective of, creating space and creating leverage with it. And for, just for reference, the Bills right now on this year have a 44% motion rate, which is 1 percentage point less than what Joe Brady's offense was in 2021. So, I don't know. I like the whole loves motion and how this is going to be drastically different and this and that. I don't know where certain pieces come from, but we'll see. It'll be interesting. I think, you'll see some wrinkles and you'll see some changes, but again, it's going to be hard to implement large scale changes on a short week. And given where we are in the NFL season being after week 10, and then, the other piece you alluded to, like against a really good defense that has kind of had your number. It presents a challenging week for Joe Brady, but also like a really fun one because we kind of get to see like what's he made of as he gets to test his mettle against the top unit, like right out of the gate.
And when we talk about a short week and we talk about the fact that there's really a 2-week window to get these guys prepped before you have the bye and way more time to kind of implement new things. And also, RJ, thank you for the comment. I want to say that one thing that could really automatically be an improvement is the mental psyche. And I know that's like such a basic take.
No, but that's real. Like you could, at a certain point, the players were playing tight. Like they felt the pressure and felt like, so there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, when you got a new coach that's kind of giving you a new energy, and I mean, I don't know what Dorsey really was doing every single practice, every single second, but to say that this guy has kind of this chip on his shoulder to come back into the league, be an OC, try to galvanize the room a little bit, and maybe the thought of like a breath of fresh air at coach, it could be something that just helps those little woes go away. And when you talk about these drives, maybe just more conceptual, mixing in deeper shot plays more often to try and get the offense back in rhythm. Now, again, it's the New York Jets. It's really hard to do against them, but maybe just opening things up and making it a tad bit more aggressive, playing a bit more up tempo, which I know you can't do all the time, but those minor variations that you can control as an offensive coordinator coming in on a short week with a playbook that you basically have to be like modifying on the fly. I think that could lend itself well to help the Bills. And I'm hoping to see that against the Jets, really. And of course, Phil, we're happy to take your question. There was another one here from Snow Turd 518. It says, "Can't wait for tomorrow to see what's new. And if it's the same old, I'm going to cry."
You're going to see it. I don't expect to see the same offense. I expect to see a lot of similarities, but just with different tweaks. And I think you'll see the same recipe, but maybe Brady uses more garlic powder than Ken Dorsey did, and maybe uses less onion salt or some piece like that. I think you'll see like those little tweaks. I think, again, like the big thing to keep an eye out for is what plays does he lean into? Like, what are his favorites from the playbook? Because Dorsey had his favorites and Dorsey would lean into them. Like, what does Brady lean into? What tweaks or variations does he add? Is there any kind of layering? And then again, the personnel piece, like, it is a big one. Like, maybe and also too, it could be matchup based. Like, he could come out and do something in this game against the Jets that might not be what he does for the entire rest of the year. He's just doing it because he thinks it's going to work against the Jets. And this is the best path to success for the offense. So we can't, I don't want to read too much into one game. But yeah, looking at like personnel usages, personnel groupings, how much 12 does he go? Does he go more 22? Does he use more Deontay Hardy? Does he put Gabe Davis more in the slot? Does he go more trips? Does he go more, Murray and Cook on the field at the same time? Does he look to establish the run earlier? Does he work it in more? Does he add more play action? Like you said, what kind of motion do we see? Those little pieces in terms of those little tweaks and wrinkles. The way I always say it is like the buttons and levers and dials are all going to be the same, but Joe Brady can push and pull them at different points in different ways and turn them to different settings. And that's what you'll really see the difference in.
Yeah, and I like this Charles G comment because one thing that you and Eric have talked about is kind of the play calling and the effect of Josh Allen's rhythm in the pocket and his progressions. And, he's saying here, I hope they switch to more progression type pass plays versus the scheme beaters. So talk to me really about this and how this kind of move is going to affect Allen specifically, because I see a lot of comments here about Allen's play. And I really want to know like what you're thinking about Brady's way to run a system and how Josh Allen can benefit or some of the challenges he might face.
Yeah, so if you're going to more of a progression type of offense, it's more just everything ties together from a whole field perspective. So you look from one, if one's not there, you go to two. If two's not there, you go to three. If three's not there, you go to check down or you go to four or whatever. Dorsey's offense has been more of, and like we've talked about a bunch that you alluded to, Dorsey's offense has been more like, okay, on the left side of the field, you have a route concept that beats cover two. On the right side of the field, you have a route concept that beats cover three. The receivers on the snap, read the leverage, read the coverage. Quarterback on the snap, read the leverage, read the coverage. If it's cover three, go to your right. If it's cover two, go to your left. Ready, break. Which can be which is awesome when it works because a defense literally can never be right. They are wrong no matter what they do because whatever coverage they run, like you have an answer for it. But it's problematic to ask that of players a lot, like to constantly have to read and diagnose on the fly and adjust in real time and then execute physically based off of that. So I think if there's more of a progression type piece, it just lessens the mental workload for Allen. You're more just reading things out holistically than you are having to diagnose them on the fly and pick your side. And also too, because if you're going with coverage beaters to each side, right? If you guess wrong or you read wrong, then you have to go back to the other side and then read that fresh at the same time. It can just create like some hurdles and some obstacles. I will say though, I hate to continue to do this, but like there have been times when there have been some full field progressions for Josh Allen and he doesn't take them or doesn't see them. He's getting those happy feet moments at times where he's just like, okay, one isn't there, two isn't there. All right, screw it. I'm going to go and I'm going to run and make a play. And he evades the pocket early or doesn't hit the open man in the progression that he could. Even when it's just a two-man progression, he's had some issues with that. But when you go from a full field progression piece, it just gives you the opportunity to read things holistically. It allows a better flow for your progression in your reading. Not necessarily better than a half field coverage beater type of thing that Dorsey's been running, just presents different benefits, different pros and cons for each. And given the cons we saw in this previous system, you're hoping that the pros, under Brady kind of outweigh things a little bit more.
And you think that the experience Brady has, albeit not a substantial amount more than Ken Dorsey, but maybe that game feel component of it could help in the fact of, or in the way of giving Josh a little more rhythm too, because you're 100% right. There's been plenty of times this year where Josh Allen has bypassed open reads for whatever reason. But I do wonder if there is, again, just a mental component where you can kind of, again, the term that we've used before, reel him in and just try to get him established and trust what he's seeing. Because one thing I've noticed, Anthony, is if you watch, and again, if you watch, but I'm saying this in
every
general.
Once in a while, I watch.
Casually, but like watching Josh Allen and watching him and his ability to kind of navigate the middle of the field and the hesitation that exists with him now versus a few years ago where it felt like there was a surefire, that gun shy didn't exist and he was willing to kind of just take that really tight window thrower, really just trusting his timing and his rhythm and his footwork and getting the ball out over the middle of the field. Do you feel like that has been a problem for Josh Allen this year, where there's been this gun shy nature, especially at that part? And do you think that's fixable in the course of the rest of this season?
I don't know if I'd say gun shy, because then he also still attempts those like ridiculous throws that get intercepted, and those aren't gun shy. Like, it's just him being like YOLO and just chucking it and seeing what happens. But it has been interesting. I don't know how to diagnose it, and I don't know enough about him. I don't think anybody does to like get into his brain and kind of see what's going on. But I will say there have been a significant amount of plays and reps this year in the regular season where somebody's coming open over the middle and Allen sees it and he just doesn't throw the ball even though somebody's wide open, or somebody's about to come open. The big one that it gets me every time that I think about is it's against the Bengals. They run a little levels concept. So it's Diggs on the outside to the left, Dalton Kincaid in the slot to the left. And it's basic levels concept. Diggs runs like a 5-yard in and Kincaid runs like a 10-yard in. And Allen is reading Jermaine Pratt, who's that apex defender to that side. If Jermaine Pratt sits and stays where he is, Josh throws it to Stephon Diggs. If Jermaine Pratt drives on the shallow route from Diggs, Dalton Kincaid slips in behind him and you hit Kincaid. On the snap, Allen wants Diggs. He looks and he goes to throw it, and he sees Jermaine Pratt driving on it. So he pumps it, and Kincaid clears and is wide open. And instead of staying there with Kincaid, he goes to the complete other side of the field, and it turns into a bad play. And that one for me, like, I don't understand why he doesn't, like, that is the play. You're literally staring at this player, and if he does A, you do B. If he does B, you do A. It's not complex. It's not overly complicated. And what he does is he does A. So, like, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, like, just to really get how frustrating it is to see him not do it. He wants to throw to Diggs. He can't throw to Diggs because Jermaine Pratt is there, which means Dalton Kincaid is now open, which he knows or should know. And so then it's like, okay, does he not know that? Okay, is it a Dorsey thing? Is it a him thing? And then you add up all the others with like the hot read issues he's had at times and the misreads and the progressions. And I don't know if it's a lack of confidence, if it's something that's being coached into him or coaching out of him. I am very interested to see if that type of inefficiency from a processing and decision-making standpoint changes under Joe Brady, because I truly don't know if it's an Allen thing. The Dorsey detractors will say, yeah, because, Ken Dorsey broke him and now he doesn't know how to play quarterback anymore, yada, yada. But I truly don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if that's an extension of issues with Dorsey. I don't know if that's become a Josh Allen thing, but it's just weird. Like, he's faltering in decisions and reads in a way that he wasn't before. And in a way that, I'm not trying to make it seem like crazy. Like, I never played quarterback, but I know some of these things because I study the game, and like some of the things that like he's missing, I would hear because as a running back on offense, we work next to the quarterbacks. I would hear quarterbacks learning this in like JV football. So I know they know it. So I'm like, why isn't he doing some of these basic things? And when that's happening, then I'm like, okay, what's the larger, problem afoot going on? And that's a big thing I'm wondering to see as well. Cause it's just like, you said it, like not pulling the trigger. It just seems like he's hitching in his brain. I'm trying to think of the right way. He's like stuck on some kind of like loop that like won't go. And he's just kind of like short circuiting and then freaks out. Like, and I don't know what's going on and what's causing it. Cause it hasn't really been a characteristic of his game the past several years. Like that's more concerning to me than everybody makes out like all the turnovers and the throws. That's the yin and yang of Josh Allen. I understand that and I'm cool with it. He's Brett Favre. It is what it is. I'm more concerned with like, that's a basic hot read. Why are you not taking it? This is a basic levels concept. Guy did A, you should do B. Why are you not doing that? And so I wonder if that stuff starts to kind of get fleshed out under Brady. Because if not, then we have a bigger worry, which is what's happened to Josh Allen. Because if he continues to make those mistakes, then it's like, what's wrong with the franchise quarterback?
Right. And that's something that why I pitched that question is because I do have that concern. And I'm not, I want to stress this when I am not saying this to say I think he's done toast.
I was gonna say, here comes the comments after, like, Joe DeRosa thinks Josh Allen's washed.
Not at all. Josh Allen is still a top 3 quarterback. I do think that Josh Allen is in a bit of a if you want to call it a slump, a hump, whatever. Yeah. And I don't think he's gonna not get out of it. But what I think is it kind of goes back to my thoughts on the whole offense. And I think when you talk about the execution errors from everyone else and you see what's happening to Josh and you see uncharacteristic things from him, and that's when you start to worry, because Josh throws stupid interceptions. He's done it every single year he's been a Buffalo Bill. He did it in 2020 when they went to the AFC Championship. He'll probably do it tomorrow. You know what I mean? That's his game. I expect Josh Allen to make dumb reads sometimes. I expect him to throw a pick. Why? Because he throws the ball down the field very often. There's a lot of dependence on him. That's the nature of the game. And I'm cool with it, like you've said, because it's just a part of it. And that's what happens when you throw a lot. You can't avoid it. But you know what? For every pick, there's 2 touchdowns. And for me, that's always been the positive side of it. So I can live with it. But when you talk about this, if you want to call it lack of confidence or lack of trust or a lack of belief in kind of his own, I don't know if you want to call it delivery, if you want to call it his own read, or if he's not trusting what he sees on the field, but in a way that hasn't really been that way before, that's when I start to worry. And I'm wondering, just, is this a scheme problem? Like you said, is it a Ken Dorsey coaching issue? Is it just Josh really having a hard time this season? And maybe a result of how defenses have kind of adjusted this year too, because again, like we've kind of seen, and I had a discussion with some people about this yesterday. I'm going to actually just pitch this whole thing to you. It seems like there has been like a league-wide change in base defenses against really good quarterbacks. We saw how that kind of too high shell approach was starting to be implemented. And that was we're going to take away the deep shot and force you to work it under the field until you absolutely earn it. And we have to come up. And that's what Allen was able to exploit. But you're seeing a bit more of like, I want to say a bit more. I don't want to say anything definitive because I could very well be wrong. But it looks like when teams defend the Bills, it's a lot of reliance on this cover 3, this I want to take your shots away, especially post snap, and I want to make you hold on to the ball or force things over to the boundary, because that's really what we're going to give up to you. And we're going to give it up at short distances where you have to keep doing it until it really either fails, there's an execution problem, or you get overzealous and make a bad read and try to do something. Do you think that possible trend for defenses in the league could be a part of this, if you want to call it slump, minor regression for Josh Allen's decision-making and really his performance?
I think it could be, to a degree, the way like defenses have swung the pendulum, the coverage structures, and what we're seeing. For me in particular, I think the answer for defenses in general and why they're seeing more success this year, I have a specific answer, and then how it even more so ties in the Buffalo Bills. So for years we've been hearing, I mean, it's the reason the name of my show, my solo show, is the name of the show, Disguise Coverage. Like, defenses' abilities to disguise coverage on the back end and, shift from a 2 high shell to a single high shell post snap, and to go from, we're showing 2 high, psych, it's actually cover 3, psych, it's actually cover 1, or vice versa. We're showing single high pre snap and you think we're making it look like cover 1, or we're making it look like cover 3. And then on the snap, it's actually quarters, or it's actually cover 2, and we're switching. The ability to disguise coverages on the back end is now pairing with teams disguising their fronts and their pressure packages more up front. You're seeing more simulated pressures. You're seeing more creeper pressures. You're seeing more, the Bengals do it a bunch. Actually, the Bengals do it a bunch. And then the Broncos did it to the Bills as well, showing pressure and then actually only rushing 3 and having a low hole player kind of act as an in coverage / spy on Josh Allen. Their defenses are doing more now to change the pre to post snap picture on the back end and up front. They're pairing that with attacking teams' protections and creating advantageous matchups. So if you have a weakness on your offensive line, defenses are able to exploit it. They'll create a one-on-one that they want, or if they think they can show a look and know what your protection rules and where you're going to slide and what you're going to do, they'll use that against you and get a free runner, or again, create an overload and an advantage. So that's just in general. Add that on top of how the Bills offense operates a lot from a passing concept standpoint, like we talked about, where a lot of it is an option-based offense, where, it's the reason, and I've said it so much, Eric says it all the time too, the reason Allen and Beasley had this great rapport and chemistry was because whatever Beasley saw, Allen saw, and they saw it at the same time. And Cole Beasley was the option route king. Like, he knew how to read leverage and he knew how to read coverage, and Josh Allen would see what he saw at the same time, and it was beautiful. But this option offense where, again, you are asking players regularly from not just Allen, I'm talking like a pass catcher standpoint. You are asking them to read coverages, read leverage, read the alignment of your man, and understand, okay, if if I'm the outside receiver and my outside corner is lined up on this way, actually, no, it's a great example. I was kind of alluding to it, but I'll just use a specific. We had Isaiah Hodgins in the film room with us last year during the preseason. He catches a simple 5-yard in. It looks like a bit. The play lasts 3/4 of a second. It's done in an instant. But for that to happen, he's reading the leverage and the alignment of the outside corner. Then on the snap, he's reading the shells and seeing what the safeties are doing. Then he's also reading the apex defender on the inside, because if he drops, he has to continue. But the apex defender sits, so he has to sit. That's just that's for one person for a basic 5-yard catch. It gets more complicated the more situational you go. And that's preseason. That's not regular season where teams are trying to game you up. So this offense has that option base in it. And when your job is to read things post snap that a defense is doing, and you're doing that on the fly in real time, and the defense is changing the picture and trying to confuse you, I think that has been more symptomatic than just the coverage shells and just what we're seeing on the back end. I think it's been more defenses are changing the pre to post snap picture on the Bills. And when you have an offense that is so option based and dependent upon accurately diagnosing what the defense is doing, that's hard, because the defense is trying to confuse you. And if you read wrong, or you're a receiver and you read A and Josh reads B, or vice versa, or you both read A, but you read it a half second later than Josh does, he's already moved on to someone else. And then added on top, if the defense also diagnosed your protection scheme and they get a free runner, or Spencer Brown gets beat, or Mitch Morse gets driven in the backfield, or whoever, it just creates a multitude of problems. So I think you're right. It is the trend. For me, that's the trend. It's that changing the pre to post snap picture on the back end and in the front in forms of simulateds and creepers and everything all tying together. And the Bills' offense being an option-based offense, it compounds those mistakes even more.
I heard a siren in the background. I think every defensive coordinator around the league heard that take and wanted to arrest you because you've said too much. But
sorry, I had the window open because I had the heat on and I'm so warm, and it's been so nice. And I heard that siren and I was like, things have been so quiet.
No, I'm only messing around. And frankly, it has to be so difficult because, again, you guys have alluded to it. When Dorsey is calling the plays, it is a very player-dependent system, and that's great if everyone's on the same page all the time. But when they're not, and you talk about pre-snap, post-snap, and look at teams my favorite example of pre to post-snap defense in the NFL right now is Baltimore, because I watched it. It is absolutely insane what they get away with and how they do it. Bring everyone up to the line of scrimmage. You have to somehow guess when everyone is there who's rushing you and who's dropping back into coverage, with linebackers that are athletic enough to actually cover and run across the field and take your flat away if that's what you decide to go to. And they almost bait you into doing it so that if you keep trusting it, they'll just sit on it. I can't imagine how difficult that has to be as a quarterback in the NFL to be able to see all of these really athletic defensive players on the line in the back end come up to the line of scrimmage and then drop out, and you have no idea where it's going. And I think about that, and then I think about other defenses that the Bills are facing. And then I look at other offenses in the AFC, because they're not alone in these struggles. I could talk about Kansas City, who's also having issues offensively. And you could see just there is seeming to be a trend. I think Charles said it in the comments about explosives going down. And then you're talking about a general regression offensively in points per game and a bunch of things. So I also think at the same time, it's not an isolated Bills issue. I don't think it's an isolated Josh Allen issue, but I do want to see a positive step forward for Allen, because I'm also of the mindset that when you see obvious glitches in the matrix with him and you see processing errors or middle of the field errors that he's not typically making, something's got to give. And I am hoping that Joe Brady can give it.
Same.
Is that the right way to say it?
Same. And what's a good way to put it? I think of the glitch in the matrix is a really good way to say it. I think of it I don't think he has the yips, like the baseball terminology, but I kind of it makes me think back when Chuck Knobloch was awesome with the Twins and he came to the Yankees and couldn't throw to first base, or Rick Ankiel was this awesome pitcher.
Oh my God.
For the what?
Rick Ankiel.
Oh, yeah,
I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. No. Rick Ankiel.
No.
That's just a name I haven't heard in forever.
I didn't know if you said, oh my God, because of the comment or because of my thing. Yeah, Rick Ankiel was this really great prospect for the Cardinals. He started, I think, game 1 of the NLDS, had a horrible outing, and then all of a sudden couldn't throw the ball to home plate anymore. They had to move him to the outfield, where he actually did pretty decent in the outfield with his strong arm and bat and everything. But some things just get into a dude's head. Or even I remember like the little bit when John Lester, I think, was with the Cubs, like he couldn't throw to first base, like the pitcher. So he like threw his glove to first base one time because he didn't have confidence and like throwing it out of his mitt. Just like weird things that get into players' head. There's a reason like sports psychologists are an important thing. Like sometimes stuff happens. And so I don't know if it's like the yips or something similar to it, or if it is Dorsey. Yeah, it's just like weird. For me, I think the biggest thing is Allen not trusting his eyes or trusting the offense or trusting what he's seeing. I think there's confidence in the on-field piece not necessarily being there. And I think some of that stems from the offense itself, but I think a lot of it stems from, again, what defenses are doing. Because like you said, it's like what Baltimore does is so beautiful. And another team that does it, the Cincinnati Bengals are great at it. The Bengals, what they do that's so beautiful, and the Ravens do it as well. That pre-snap look, they hold it literally until the snap. So there's no like, oh, he moved like a second early, I know what's coming now. They all just hold it. And then on the snap, the picture completely shifts. Baltimore does it really well. Cincinnati does it really well. Kansas City does it really well with Steve Spagnuolo. You get these defensive coordinators that get into their bag. Jacksonville does it well. Todd Bowles does it well at times. And then the Bills have gotten caught with that too, because it's harder to work against that when you get into third and longs, which the Bills have done. So if you're in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, defensive coordinators can really get into their bag and be like, yo, we're going to confuse the absolute hell out of them with this and force them to play this game that they don't want to.
Yeah. And again, it's complicated when you have an offense dependent on execution from players really reading it on the field in real time. Again, like you guys have said, and I really appreciate that this is the statement that comes out, is on paper, or at least conceptually, it makes sense. There's nothing that Dorsey was doing that was just, head scratching as far as a philosophy standpoint, but you're asking a lot of professional offensive players to go out there and try to do this in real time. And I think what I'd like to see, and this will be my final thought, just really on the coordinator talk, is if Joe Brady's able to kind of take the thought out of it a little bit more. Obviously, you can't do that as a whole. Sometimes you do have to read leverage. Sometimes you got to put on your big boy pants as a quarterback and be able to understand what the safety's doing before the snap and where he's going to go after the snap. And that's perfectly fair. But a little more reliance on my play calling and my options and what I'm presenting to you and trusting them. Because I think if that happens going forward, that's how the rhythm comes back. And I think Brady has a chance to really start that against the Jets by maybe, again, more tempo, more quick hitters, more things that are just, hey, trust me, this is what I'm calling for you. I want you to take it if it's there. And if you can, it'd be great.
I think that piece, just trying to limit the mental load for Allen and for the players in general, like, and like just asking players to consistently, like on the snap, read everything out is such like a hard piece to do with regularity, like you said. And I think that ties into my biggest gripe that I ever had with Dorsey, which is from the middle of last year, the Bills have had a good run game. And so I was just like, run the ball more. Just there's nothing complicated with just being like, hey, we're going to hand the ball off and we're going to run this play. That's it. I wanted him to run the ball more and lean into that game and that aspect more. And if your passing concepts were going to be that reliant on player execution, cool. But then you can't be passing it 75% of the time. You have to kind of give everybody a mental and physical break when you can. I'm also hoping, Joe Brady leans into the run a bit more as well. Because again, the Bills do have a good run game on tape and within the data. But that was a big piece that drove me nuts as well. Like, because not only were you asking players to execute at a high level, you were asking them to do that a bunch and not pivoting to kind of give them a breath or pivoting to an actual good piece of the team in the run game that was, one, working, but two, also lets everybody kind of turn their brain off for a couple minutes.
And that's something, when I've had you on the show before, you talked to me about how the Bills kind of got away from the run a bit prematurely. And it seems like that resurfaced again this season. And that was you hope that they break those trends. And that's why we had the patience going into the season for Dorsey. But when they're continuing,
the Giants game was the biggest one for me. Like, everybody was talking about Gabe Davis's fumble and this happened here and this happened here and it was bad luck. My biggest thing with the Giants game, I was like, dude, why did it take you to the second half to run the ball? And then look what happened. They won that game because they went on those two, double-digit play, 7-8 minute drives where they just ran it down the Giants' throats, literally running the ball down their throats. And I was like, why didn't you do this at the start of the second quarter? Like, why did it take you so long to be like, all right, guys, we should come out and run the ball. Let's do this. And that ties into your bigger point earlier. Like, I think that is in the grander conversation of taking too long to adjust at times in game. And that run game piece was a big one, especially too with, defenses are trying to confuse the hell out of you and change the pre to post snap picture, and they want to limit explosives and have 2 high shells and all this stuff. Cool. You know what simplifies all that? Run the ball right down their friggin' throat. Run it right at them. Like, that's it. You don't have to worry about who's coming from where and do I have to read the coverage and is this apex defender actually covering the flat, or is he going to drop and be a half field player? Doesn't matter. Hand the ball off, run it down their throat, which you've been good at. Take advantage. It's kind of like the South Park, phase 1, run the ball, phase 3, profit. I don't care what phase 2 is. Just run the ball.
Yeah, well, and go ahead. You get past the midfield and they want to send people up at the line of scrimmage to confuse you. Okay, hand the ball off, pull a tackle, and just, all right, you want to have a safety try to defend Spencer Brown at the second level? I'd love to see you try that. We'll go for 10 yards. So
yeah, and then you start tying in that run game. The play action becomes more effective. And then if you want to run it out of shotgun, cool. You want to keep running dart or duo out of shotgun and all that stuff, cool. Put a pass tag with it or put an RPO, which they did against Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
That made me think things were really turning. They were running that tackle wrap dart play that I tweet out literally every single week, and they were rolling with it. And then they started rolling with it in like the third quarter. They put a pass tag on it and started running RPO off of it. And they hit one to Kincaid. They hit one to Gabe Davis. And I was like, yes, like now that's a little layer. Like, look what we're doing. And then it didn't happen the week after, and sadness ensued.
Sadness. Yeah, that Tampa game was almost like a what do you call it? Like a tease, really. And listen, it was a short week, a couple of days. They had to hyper simplify it. So I do understand to some degree why it looked that way on a short notice.
But think about that, right? Simplify. Like they just got to the brass tacks and bare bones of it and were like, hey, let's just do this. And then they were able to move the ball well. And just, I think that's a key for Brady too, right? Like just simplify things. Like don't try to come out and hit 4 home runs. Like hit a single here, try and get a double. If you have to steal some bases and manufacture some stuff on the base pass, that's cool. But there's something to be said for getting back to the essence of football and what this offense can be, and then building and stacking those layers from there.
Firmly agree. But we're going to move on to our next topic, and it's probably our most important one today. We saved the best for last, and that's Sean McDermott's future with the Buffalo Bills. And I know that's like a loaded one, but I really want to break this down. But you know what, Ant? I'm just going to come out and say I have an insanely hot take here. This might be the most controversial thing I've ever said on this show ever. And that's – wait, hang on. Oh, sorry, guys. Greg and Aaron. Sorry. They just interrupted. They don't want to hear the hot take. They want you to find out about the Cover One pass.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Oh, I dropped the ball and realized that the banner doesn't go away when you roll the clip. So I just looked and saw the Sean McDermott. But anyways,
look what you did.
Look what I did. That's what I get for making a really bad joke while we're on stream.
No, that was good. I liked it. I knew it was going to be something sarcastic, and I was like, I wonder what's coming here.
But everybody in the chat, first and foremost, thank you again for being here. Please drop a like on this video. As Greg and Aaron just told you, the Cover One Pass, the link is in the description below, and I implore every one of you who has not already signed up to sign up. That is truly the backbone of this network. It helps everyone out. It helps amazing people like Anthony Prohaska and get their resources to be able to deliver quality content for you on their show, and everyone else who just puts a lot of time and effort into all of the content coming out. That is how we are able to do it. So please, if you have not signed up already, I implore you, check it out in the description below. Anthony, let us talk about Sean McDermott. Now, I want to say Sean McDermott's future is a vague, scary term, but it has to be talked about because we did just see debatably the most strife, the most turmoil that this franchise has been under his leadership. And yes, I am talking more than 2018 and the Tyrod Taylor, Nathan Peterman benching and all of that stuff. To me right now, this feels like the most dire time for Sean McDermott as a coach of this team. And I will say that Sean McDermott is not blameless. Sean McDermott has shown some serious coaching, I guess you could call it lapses, especially in later stages of the game. But I think that there is a conversation about how we're feeling about him as the coach going into the really tough stretch, our confidence level, and really what we kind of see happening, which is hard to say, but something that at least we can give our general outlook on. So, Anthony, I'm just going to ask you, talk to me about your current feelings about Sean McDermott, just really him as a coach, him as a play caller. Like, what are you seeing that either breeds concern for his future or maybe the opportunity for him to right the ship and stick around?
I think some of his we'll go with concerns first. I think some of the big game moments kind of getting away from the team. And I don't know if it's necessarily his fault or not, but I think of things like the I hate to do this, but like 13 seconds happening. And then this 12 men on the field. Oh, that's funny from William. FYI, you're helping me through putting together. I hate putting stuff together. So good luck, William. I hope you're doing good with that desk. Just like the big game moments. And I don't just mean like a big game, like a playoff game. I mean like the couple moments in a game that can really decide something. Seeing him falter in those moments, or kind of seeing the communication falter, I should say, some of the decision-making with challenges and game management at times, and some of his decision-making. I think, that's funny there for that comment there. 12-man seems like a capstone of some consistent lack of focus at critical moments. Yeah, however you want to label it, like it just seems like this team, not just McDermott, but the team kind of falters in these big moments. And I think, if we're going to do the same game with Ken Dorsey, I think you have to do the same game with Sean McDermott, which is at some point, okay, like a special teams coach can make a mistake, like what happened with the 13 seconds, or players can make a mistake. But if those kind of mistakes are continuously happening, then it's like, okay, fish rots from the head down. Like, do we start to look at the head a little bit and see what's up? So I think that's like kind of the biggest detractor piece for him. But on the whole, like I really like Sean McDermott, and I think it's easy to kind of always get caught in the grass is greener on the other side type of thing. I think there is something to be said for, the devil that you know versus the devil that you don't. I don't know if it's an automatic turnaround easy thing that, if we fire Sean McDermott, we get a brand new head coach. Awesome. This team is boom, Super Bowl bound. Here we go. Put strap a rocket to our backs and we're good to go. This team could get worse significantly. Like there's a lot of variables, and I understand both sides of it. But I think if we're really looking at the biggest concerns for me, it's just been like they're faltering in big games, because it's one thing to lose big games or not win the Super Bowl, because even if we're just again looking at it from a brass tack standpoint, what's greater, your one team winning the Super Bowl or one of the other 31 teams in the NFL? The odds are one of those other 31 teams are going to win. It takes a friggin' lot to win a Super Bowl. There is no best of 7, best of 3, best of 5 game series. If you have a shitty day, or you have a bunch of injuries, or the weather doesn't work, or there's a horrible call by the refs, or if there's just one thing that can go wrong, you're done. There is no like, all right, we'll course correct and get at it next week, or we'll get at it in game 2. No, it's single elimination. You lose, you're done. It's hard to win a ring. But I think there's something to be said for just losing versus the way the Buffalo Bills have lost at times in that McDermott era, and those large-scale falters in big moments in the playoffs, in the regular season, especially their performances against top-tier teams, and how they've kind of been gamed up a little bit by those opposing coaches and coaching staffs come big games, especially come playoff time in that regard. That worries me a little bit. So I can understand people wanting him out for that. But that's kind of the biggest thing for me. For me, I'm not getting rid of him like right now. Like we can have as we go further in the conversation, but that's like what I would point to that gives me the most cause for concern and trepidation and stuff like that.
And that's what I think is the issue for me too. It's not, I think Sean McDermott as a leader of men, as a person who, you ask to kind of be that presence to kind of stabilize a locker room, is the person who can do that for you. I think first and foremost, I think a lot of the discourse around Sean McDermott's a bit hyperbolic, in that I don't think Sean McDermott is puppeteering anything to be his like, oh, marvelous, Josh Allen's running so much less, and I'm so excited to neuter our quarterback.
I don't know how that narrative gets out, or the narrative with like, oh, well, Sean McDermott wants to run the ball. The Bills have been one of the most prolific passing offenses in terms of success and volume for the last like 3-4 years. Like there's just certain things that get attributed to McDermott that I just don't understand.
Oh my, it's fourth down. I want to punt when we're inside enemy territory. Like, no, Sean McDermott has statistically been one of the most aggressive play callers and has
Yes.
trended upward every single season that he's been in the league. Sean McDermott has called at times inopportunistic timeouts, things that you kind of scratch your head a little bit. And what happened on Monday night against Denver is absolutely worth criticizing Sean McDermott for. You got to have your ducks in a row. You got to have your team set. Everyone needs to be on the same page. Those communication errors at the end of games are crucial. And when you have them, it does lead to situations where you get a missed field goal and end up still losing the game because you had 12 men on the field. And you talk about 13 seconds. You talk about some other moments where there have been these kind of blunders, and that is 100% valid. And I have said, I think his seat's a little hot. I think it's a hot seat. I don't think that means get rid of him now. I think you ride the season out. But I do think it's open for discourse that if this team were to absolutely bottom out, and I'm saying like dismal failure by the end of the season, you miss the playoffs, you have a losing record, whatever, that's when I think the conversation should be had about his future with the team and what you want to go for. However, even with me saying that, I don't think Sean McDermott's a bad coach. I don't think Sean McDermott is this source great evil that plagues the Bills locker room. I think that what happens is with emotion comes blame, with blame comes answers, and with answers comes who's obvious. And the obvious person is Sean McDermott. And when I see people say, because I just said this about Ken Dorsey, I'm not going to say I didn't. You got to look at it from a top-down matriculation standpoint. I think, again, if the team is absolutely bottoming out, struggling, looking terrible, that is a point where you have to look at that and say, all right, what's given here? Like, is this what we want to continue on with? But I also think that it's really tricky because I think when we talk about the woes of or the things as to why the team is taking a step back, I truly don't think that a lot of those issues are variables that are caused directly by Sean McDermott, but outside circumstances. Like, again, you got to talk about the injuries. I know people don't like the injury excuse. You have to talk about them when you talk about the identity of this team. This team was not expecting to lose multiple All-Pros. One that was on his way to being an All-Pro and was by all metrics the best defensive tackle in football. He was not expecting to have to pivot to change his style of really his whole team philosophy because his defense isn't healthy and getting teams off the field. And frankly, I don't think Sean McDermott was expecting an offense to really have these kind of blunders and regressions that they've had. And I think when you see the response in firing Ken Dorsey, I don't take that as scapegoating. I don't. I think it was a justifiable decision because you got to look at games where the offense is putting a ton of pressure on a banged up defense because they're not sustaining or executing drives. And like that is an offensive problem more to a degree than I think it's on McDermott. So I kind of view it as with the way this team was constructed this year. And I'm looking at their philosophy and I'm looking at how they wanted to win games and how they wanted to control teams. It really wasn't a bad philosophy. It was working, but unforeseen circumstances knocked them out of that approach, and it's become exponentially more difficult. And I think what happens is the woes of Sean McDermott as a head coach, which again are perfectly valid. I'm not defending him or absolving him of blame. They become more magnified because you're ending up in these situations more often. But again, look at the strings and look at all the different chains as to all the different problems, and it falls back on, all of them that leads to these terrible moments. And I just think it's like so complicated that I don't know if I'm ready to just be out on McDermott yet. I think I just need to see and I don't want to see this. I need to see a true bottoming out for me to think it's time to move on.
I agree. I have to see a bottoming out. And I think more importantly, I think the organization has to see one. Like Pagula loves McDermott and Bean. They just got new contracts this offseason. They would have to finish with 5 or 6 wins for McDermott to go. Like for me personally, and I also think the larger conversation too, I think it's regardless of what we think, if everybody here thinks McDermott should be fired, that doesn't mean anything. It matters if Terry Pagula thinks Sean McDermott should be fired. I don't think he's going to think that way unless, again, this team really bottoms out. Like you said, they have to finish with 5 or 6, maybe 7 wins. They have to look atrocious. They get stomped by New England and Miami to end the year. It's got to be a lot of bad energy and bad vibes and things going wrong for McDermott to be out for me. And I think for this organization. And I also think what's an interesting piece too, that's made his job harder this year with him being the defensive coordinator. It's hard to be a head coach and a play caller for either side of the ball. There's a reason that majority of the head coaches we see are offensively driven anyway. But when McD moves to defense coach and makes Bill Fans head coach, so they get fired. That's funny. That's hilarious. Well done. You got to play the long con. There's something to be said for the amount of head coaches that are offensive minded guys. But there's not many, head coaches that are offensive minds that call plays that don't have some stalwart on the defensive side of the ball. Like Andy Reid calls plays for Kansas City. He's got Steve Spagnuolo as his defensive coordinator. Zach Taylor for Cincinnati. He's got Lou Anarumo. Like, they're able to be the head coach, but also focus so much on the offensive side of the ball because they have a defensive coordinator that can almost run things unsupervised on the defensive side. I don't think McDermott has had that for the offense this year. And I think that's also contributing to some of the errors and mistakes that we're seeing overall from a holistic team standpoint, which I think is an interesting little nugget to look at. But I'm right there in lockstep with you, whether it's for myself or thinking what the organization is going to do. It's really got to fall apart for him to go.
Shout out to you, Fluffy Panda, and your adorable dog as your profile picture for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. And Fluffy Panda says, frustrating things for some is the fire happy fans. Day one, they've hated McDermott, Josh Allen, Dable, Dorsey, which makes some over defend McDermott, Josh Allen. Offense needs tweaking. Yeah, offense needs tweaking. I do think that there has been, I think the 13 seconds moment has absolutely created a large rift in how people evaluate McDermott. Some see it as a blunder and want him to improve, and some see it as a blunder and are done. Completely checked out. Like, that is the absolute mindset of this fan base. And I think the rift has grown larger with each, season's failure. And I definitely understand it. And again, I'm sitting somewhere where it's like, I'm not on one side or the other. It's the most central thing and probably a complete culmination of my perspective as a sports fan and me as a host of this show. I'm in the middle, man. I'm in the middle. Like, I'm looking at both sides and I'm like, I can't pick one yet because I feel like I just need a larger sample size of which is silly because you don't want your team to bottom out or suck. But when I'm talking about a head coach and I think back to and people have brought this point up, the drought years and some really bad coaching regimes, that to me I know you shouldn't have to overtly rely on nostalgia or bad nostalgia and bad sample size fear. But I also think the grass is greener on the other side is a great point. Like, everyone talks about, they should just hire Ben Johnson or they should just hire the Houston Texans OC or Lou Anarumo. And I'm like, that's fine and dandy. And these guys have a more than great resume to become head coaches. Some of them have not been head coaches. That means head coaching growing pains that you saw with Sean McDermott are probably going to happen with those hires. So you're getting the same thing. But instead, the emphasis is a bit more offensive, which I guess could be good. But again, you're thinking it as the person who comes in is automatically going to right the ship. And they could. It's not that they won't. But I just think you have to be really careful in what you wish for.
They could right the ship or they could be terrible. Like, you literally don't know.
Dude, and that's the thing is it's always these delusions of grandeur. It's always people saying if Ben Johnson comes in here, it's going to fix Josh Allen and we're going to have it. Ben Johnson, and I'm glad that I see this point from, I think it's Hale Kazakhstan or Kozat. I can't, I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can't, I apologize for butchering your username, but this is kind of a good point. And I think that this is something that I feel like could also lend itself to these newer coaches if you did want to bring one in, which is, in my opinion, McDermott having to play defensive coordinator and head coach is a bigger issue than we realize. Eyes are taken off of the offense, and even Smiley has to be an assistant head coach. Not surprising that there was an aggression on O in special teams. So the idea of McDermott being stretched in, I talked about this with Aaron Schatz when he was on the show. That was his concern. Do you think this is the theory, like a valid theory as to why you might see some of those lapses?
It's possible. I think it goes into what I was kind of alluding to earlier. Like, if you're going to be that involved on the defensive side, there's a reason defensive coordinators aren't also involved in the offense. There's a reason offensive coordinators aren't also involved in the defense. Like, it's a completely time-consuming job. McDermott has to be head coach plus defensive coordinator. It's completely, I think, not only reasonable, but expected to think that he's going to have less, oversight over the offense as a whole. So you need you need things to be buttoned up and tight on that offensive side of the ball if you're Sean McDermott, because you don't really have the purview or the bandwidth to get there regularly and be able to course correct and help things out. I think that's like a really good point. Yeah, and it's part of what I was talking to with, like, what Andy Reid has on defense in Kansas City, what Zach Taylor has on defense in Cincinnati. Like, it all kind of coalesces and works together to create that bigger picture. And can I pull up a comment real quick and just say something
Go
funny?
for it. Yeah.
The RJ's comments about like threatening KC to give us Andy Reid, and we just steal Andy Reid from KC. The reason I wanted to bring those up, like that narrative, right? Everybody talks about Andy Reid being this offensive minded, this great head coach. Philadelphia literally wanted to burn him at the stake because he could not win a Super Bowl. They went to multiple NFC championships and then got nothing. Went to one Super Bowl, lost. They waited for him to have one down year and he got fired. And Philadelphia Eagles fans danced in the street. Then he went to Kansas City. His Kansas City teams that were going to the playoffs every year, they lost to Marcus Mariota and the Tennessee Titans that had like no offense. Yeah, literally, Save a Whale Rider running back says Reid was run out of Philly. And he was still looked at as a failure in Kansas City until things with Mahomes clicked. It's funny just to see, like, and I'm not saying RJ's like comment is wrong at all, but it's funny just to see the narratives that change for coaches. Like Andy Reid is now this offensive savant and this amazing head coach. He was looked at as one of the biggest failures in the NFL. He was literally like run out of Philly. And then with Kansas City, it was, well, same old Andy Reid, can't get the job done, can't get past the wild card, can't get past the division round. Not surprised Kansas City lost. And then things turn. And I'm not saying that will happen for Sean McDermott here or somewhere else, but it just goes to that point of you're not really seen in a positive light until you are, if that makes sense. You're not seen as a Super Bowl caliber person until you actually win a Super Bowl. And there's a multitude of things that go into that. And I think the Andy Reid conversation is so funny, like especially from, and again, RJ's comment is like, I would love to have Andy Reid. That'd be fantastic. But it's funny because I see so many people that are like, man, I wish we had Andy Reid. I wish we had Andy Reid. And I'll be like, would you have been saying this 7 years ago when like he was floundering in Kansas City, just like he was in Philadelphia? Like and I think it goes to that bigger piece too with the comment from Fluffy Panda, like everybody just wants blood. Everybody wants someone's head on a stake at some point. And it just leads to exaggeration and hyperbole. And it's the Tremaine Edmonds thing kind of all over again. Like even just that piece of like, I never said I thought Tremaine Edmonds was amazing. My hard stance was always, I think he's better than he gets credit for. And I got labeled as this guy who like loves Tremaine Edmonds, or like everybody would want Dorsey's head on a stick. And I'd be like, no, I don't think he's as bad as everybody thinks he is. And they'd be like, oh, well, there's a Dorsey apologist. And it's like, Jesus, like the amount of intensity from an emotional standpoint that results when your team loses or your team doesn't do what you want, I think just needs to be toned down a little bit. Because like you said, there's very rare in football, it's 11 on 11. That doesn't include all the coaches and all the people involved in game plans. Like defensive coordinators, for example, or offensive coordinators, they don't put the entire game plan together. A multitude of their coaches do stuff. You might be the running backs coach, but you put together, the third down package for this week, or you're the linebackers coach and you put together the third down package on that side, or you're the secondary coach, you put together the red zone work and all that. There's a multitude of people and variables as a result that go into game planning and then executing a game plan on game day. So it's very rarely, if ever, one person or one side of the ball or one thing that is wrong with the team. It is a multitude of them, but that's a harder conversation. That's a harder thing to fix. And neither of those things make people feel better when they're emotional and reactionary. So you cry for blood and you want someone's head on a pike, and we just go round and round. And say they bring in Ben Johnson. Cool. What happens if the Bills miss the playoffs next year? Do they fire Ben Johnson because that means Ben Johnson sucks? Like, what's the barometer for success and tolerance, and where do you go from there? It just seems very arbitrary and reactionary to the whole situation.
And I mean, to play devil's advocate, McDermott's been here for 6 seasons. So I think at that point you see the stretch, and you kind of, where I think fans are coming from is, all right, we've seen this story enough times where I think it's time for a healthy moving on. But I also think, again, like, you bring up Andy Reid. Andy Reid is always the best example because prior to Patrick Mahomes, that's what it was. And it was consistent stalling out. And also, Pepperidge Farm remembers all those memes about Andy Reid's clock management. Like, we all used to make jokes about it because it was bad and it was losing them playoff games. And he gets Patrick Mahomes, and what ends up happening is you have a franchise quarterback and a really great offense, because Andy Reid is an amazing offensive coach, and they put up enough points, but they don't really have to worry.
And that's a piece too. Like, I don't think Andy Reid becomes the Andy Reid we know without Patrick Mahomes. And I don't think Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes without Andy Reid. That's another piece too. Like, the Bills passed on Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes doesn't become Patrick Mahomes if he's not learning under Alex Smith for a year and then working with Andy Reid. But again, that's the point. Like, it's all these things together. It's not just one thing. It's everything gets mixed together in the pot. And what comes out of the pot is very important.
Yeah, it's like, hey, a peanut butter sandwich without jelly is dry and miserable. A jelly sandwich without peanut butter is weird.
I would still eat a peanut butter sandwich. I'm not eating a jelly sandwich. That's weird.
I would too. I have eaten it. I'm going to say it on air. I have eaten a jelly sandwich before. Those were dark times as a kid. Anyways, I started this comment from Linda a while back, and I felt bad that I didn't get to it, but I wanted to wait till we pivoted to this discourse, because I think this is another question that's going to be fun to answer, especially in the wake of the McDermott discussion. Can someone please explain to me what it means when they say a coach loses the locker room? Now, I think it's as simple as the players just simply don't buy into what the coach is selling anymore. There's not as much motivation. Therefore, the play is poor. The play is bad. The product on the field goes completely negative, and the coach that tries to give his input or anything is just met with criticism and kind of doubt. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. It's the easiest way I could put it into perspective. It's just like, imagine a coach is telling everybody what to do for the week or the game or getting everybody ready, and then you've got the players are just like eye rolling or like, oh, this friggin' guy, like that type of thing. It just means like, yeah, you've lost faith, you've lost confidence in your coach and that piece. You lose the buy-in. You said it exactly. They're not buying what the coach is selling anymore.
Yeah, that's really it. Like, it seems like when you hear that term, it's going to be like this hyper convoluted thing, but I don't think it is. I think it's really just a matter of like, your players are not really buying in anymore, and that's just kind of it. And really, I hope that's not the case with Sean McDermott. I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. I think this team has been around him long enough now where they've seen similar scenarios where the ship's been right, where they were 7-6 in 2021 and ended up going on that playoff run.
When everybody wanted Dable's head on a stick, but now everybody remembers Dable as the greatest offensive coordinator that ever lived.
Pepperidge Farms remembers 9 points against an Urban Meyer-led Jacksonville Jaguars.
Every time we play Jacksonville in the regular season, it's just like a death sentence for some reason.
It is a death sentence, and it's really unfortunate, but I want the takeaway from this discussion to really be, I understand the frustrations of this fan base. I completely empathize with everyone who is angry at the result on the field and angry at Sean McDermott. I have said on Twitter in conversations, I think his seat is hot and he needs to correct it this year. And if they miss the playoffs, I'm open to the discussion of moving on. I just think right now in this moment, I am willing, given the fact that we have been a division winning playoff team for the past couple of years, to let him continue, just see how the season plays out, and our evaluations will happen at the end of the year. And if we have to move on, I hope that they make the right decision as we move on.
Yeah, I think he's earned some leeway to a degree, but that doesn't mean he's earned like carte blanche for forever. Like, you have to look at his failures and his successes all in one and just try and, again, it's tough. Like, you could hire a new head coach and that could be amazing. You could hire a new head coach and it could be awful. Like, there's just a multitude of variables. There's no guarantee either way, but I think he deserves the criticism that he's gotten, but some of it is just a bit too far.
Yeah, a bit too far. I agree with that. So, Ant, we did run a little bit longer. I did have one more thing, if you have the time for it, about the Bills versus Jets game. But before I do, I have to ask you just really one important question. It's probably the most important question I'm going to ask you on this show. And that is, do you like fantasy football?
It's the bane of my existence, but yes, I do like it.
Oh, it's the bane of mine as well. And that's so good that you like it. And it's so good that people in our chat like it, because I want to tell you all about the easiest way to get some action on the NFL. And it's Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite or least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em entry, get every pick right, and take home some cold, hard cash. Use the code COVER1 and get your first deposit doubled up to 500 gold doubloons by Underdog. Thank you so much to Underdog Fantasy for being a partner and sponsor of Cover One. And now we will wrap up our show with the final topic for the one thing that we are hoping brings a smile to our faces this week, and that is the Bills versus Jets game. And Anthony, I see you shaking your head. I'm shaking mine. This is a terrible defense to be going up against in the wake of all that we just spoke about. But they got to play them. They beat them in Buffalo last year after a bad performance in MetLife. Give me your thoughts on this matchup offensively, defensively.
We'll start defensively. I think it's funny, like neither offense for either team is where they want to be. Like the Jets thought they were going to have Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson was never going to see the light of day again. And now they're back having to rely on Zach Wilson. And the Bills offense has all their pieces, but they haven't hit the stride that they've been hoping to hit. It's going to be tough for the Bills offense again. Like the way the Jets defense operates from a talent perspective and a schematic perspective, it presents problems for the Bills. They have a tremendous front on the defensive line and at the linebacking core. Like CJ Mosley looks like Baltimore CJ Mosley again. Yep. Quincy Williams is just a heat-seeking missile of a linebacker against the pass and the run. And then their front, like they're loaded with, like Bryce Huff has the best, pass rush productivity of any defensive line player in the entire league. And then Quinton Williams is a stud and John Franklin Myers is tremendous. And you see what they've gotten from Jermaine Johnson this year. They just have all these guys that present problems in one-on-one situations. And then you add what they do schematically on top of it up front. And then from a coverage standpoint, they're just really good at muddying everything and making Josh not know what the coverages are. And, am I sinking or am I staying here? Am I the flat defender or am I, going to drop back a little more? What am I doing? And I think that contributes to some of the inefficiencies that we saw. So I think it's another tough task for this Bills offense. The Jets defense is good schematically. They're good with talent. That's why I think you need to simplify things as best as you can. Try and run the ball and establish that early and build off your play action game. Get the running backs involved. I want to see James Cook out in space against Quincy Williams and against CJ Mosley to try and make them work. But it's a tall task on that side of the ball. And then defensively, the Bills defense is going to have to show up again and kind of play another, how the Bills defense is injured. The Jets are going through a similar piece with Aaron Rodgers and what they got on the offensive line. So you're just hoping that this Bills defense can continue to do what they've done, which is hold the fort and kind of tread water and come up with some big plays, maybe get a couple of turnovers. But this is going to be another fight. This is going to be another drag out game. Like I could see this being 17-14 or 20-13 or 24-20. I really think this might be like the first team that gets to 20, like boom, that's it. But it's another tough one. And man, I love the Jets defense. I just love what they do and how they play the game. I've loved them since last year. Just what they did early on, just how they've revamped things and how they attack and their mind and preparation for everything. So it's another tough one. It's less than ideal for it to be Joe Brady's first game, but like we talked about, also potentially cool because we get to see what's he made of it with a little baptism by fire right off the bat.
100%. And I'm, excuse me, I hope that with this game, what you see from Allen is, again, just not trying to take the bait, because it felt like in that first game, a lot of his bad throws were because at the moment when he was trying to take that throw, I think except for the first one, it seemed like he had a window where he trusted his arm enough to fit it deep, and then Whitehead broke on the ball and made an insane play. And then that Gabe Davis interception ended up being really predictive of a lot of Josh's picks this year, because that concept that they've run so many times in years past.
Yeah, where he just walked underneath. He had Kincaid and he just forced it to Gabe. It was just like, what are you doing? You don't need to do that. Oh, stupid game.
Yeah. It's they got to stop taking the bait. Allen has to stop taking bait. It has to be a more patient approach. And I think the one way offensively that you could really attack them is baiting their aggression. And I'd really love to see if you could kind of exploit some things where maybe their linebackers are really trying to, because they don't blitz often. They're not a heavy blitzing team. They're usually like a wide 9-4-man rush. Yeah. But if
when you have a nasty four, they've got 7 guys who can all win one-on-one. You don't have to blitz. You just rush 4 and let them work.
Exactly. But with that in mind, that means their linebackers are obviously going to drop back into coverage. And I'm wondering if there's ways to manipulate them off the ball, and you could have someone potentially go into a soft spot. I would love to see how Joe Brady attacks this. If you do happen to see more motion presented as well, if that does end up becoming a thing they try running a little bit more often, or if they maybe even try to rely on Josh's legs a little bit more to potentially open things up. Because again, if you have people dropping back into coverage, maybe you could exploit some deeper routes to take the linebackers further up the field, 4-man rush, let Josh get a little window to run, maybe a little more hesitation in how they use their linebackers, and maybe try to keep a spy up there. And then maybe you open some passing lanes, but it's a really, really tough ask against a really freaking good defense. And again, it's just so tough to be going up against them. But what gives me hope is being at home, seeing that you've had a really terrible game against them already. Other teams having their occasional licks, like the Raiders got a couple of scores on them. You might be able to take something from that and watch and use, if for Raiders it's Adams, you use Stephon Diggs in a way they might have used him and try to just really take him away from spots where he's going to be bracketed. I think you could have some success, but it's going to be a dogfight. And when you talk about Bills defense, I mean, I fully expect the same thing we saw in week 1. It's just unfortunate that, that ended up not being enough because the offense was shut down so much. And I don't remember who brought it up in our Cover One chat yesterday, but the special teams is a concern of mine too. And I think it might have been Aaron.
They've been bad. They've been bad with coverage. I mean, obviously, ironically, talk about the Jets where they gave up the game winner in overtime there, but they haven't been great with coverage from a kickoff standpoint, from a punt standpoint, the 12 men thing, which is special teams related. Yeah, they've and they're usually one of the best, like year over year, like regardless of who the special teams coach is. Like Sean McDermott is a big proponent of like being strong in all 3 phases of the game, and they've been uncharacteristically poor this year on the special team side of things.
100%. And I want to give a shout out to Mr. Whittle. Thank you for watching, man. And the comment is, tell me the offense under Brady is going to be less predictable, more explosive, and more under centery. I like under centery.
Sure.
Whittle, yeah. the offense under Brady is going to be less predictable, more explosive, and more under centery. No, it could be. I just don't think you're going to see that this week, next week. I think post-bye is when those wrinkles could start to be implemented, but it's like, how much are you expecting over the course of how many more games are left? 6 games, 7 games? I can't do math right now. I'm an idiot.
I'm good. The 18 game schedule throws me off all the time. There's 6. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. 17 games. So there is 7 games left.
7 games.
8 weeks. God, it throws me off all the time.
Yeah. I can't do it either. I'm so used to the 10-6, the 9-7, the 13-3. And even though the Bills finished 13-3 last year, that extra week still throws me off. And Whittle again, thank you so much. Now, the question is, can we run a successful halfback tight end screen this season? I hope.
So much is a lot of this is on Josh Allen. One, he is not good with screen timing, like from a out of the backfield perspective, like the trajectory he puts on the ball, what he does with his eyes. Like, I just don't think he's comfortable running halfback screens. Then on top of it, the way defenses rush the Bills and rush Josh Allen, knowing like what he can do with his legs, you're not really getting those defensive fronts that are just selling out to come forward and attack. So there's a multitude of things from a way the Bills offense gets played by defenses, plus how Josh Allen operates. I don't know if we're ever going to see a successful like screen out of the backfield type of game. Like we didn't have it under Dable. We didn't have it under Dorsey. And the common denominator there is Josh Allen. He's just not good on those. And, again, defense is the way they play him. It just works to not like kind of fall into that wheelhouse, but they do have a good enough like smoke screen, tunnel screen kind of game. And maybe they can lead into that piece a little bit more. But yeah, it's a tough ask. Like there's a reason that they continue to falter or not even go to that aspect of the offense. It's because the way defenses play him and the way Josh Allen kind of works.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because I've always said like Allen, it's not that Allen can't lead receivers, but Allen's best ball is when he's putting it on the spot. And like, that's fine and dandy. Like I like when he can hit someone's chest, but when you talk about those short intermediate screens, it's hard to watch sometimes, man.
He just doesn't have like a feel for it because it's so like it's based on deception and timing and rhythm, and like all 3 have to like coalesce into one, and it just doesn't for him ever.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I've said 100% so much on this show that we're over 1,000%. But you keep making points I agree with, so I have to say it. All right, well. That honestly, I can't think of anything more for the preview just because, again, we've seen them before. I think it's going to be a dogfight, a low-scoring game. I'm hoping that there are some things Brady can course correct in the span of a short week against a really tough defense. But truth be told, given the Jets' consistency and how bad their offense has been this year against every team they've played with varying degrees of defense, and given the fact that this team is going up against the defense that for every single game that they've won or lost has played really good ball, I can't see it being anything more than maybe, like you said, 20 points, 21 max. But I'm hoping that the Bills can at least have those 1 or 2 drives in this game that ultimately make a difference. Because truth be told, I think this defense can shut down Zach Wilson and really key in on Breece Hall and make that the problem. Also, Jets O-line is injured and really, really bad right now. So
yeah. Don't turn the ball over offensively. Don't let the Jets run the ball on their side for their offense. Like, just you can't do anything to make it easy for the Jets offense in this game. That's the way you lose this game. The Bills offense is better than the Jets offense without a doubt, and their defense is still good enough to get the job done. Just don't shoot yourselves in the foot and don't do anything to give the game away and give any type of confidence or momentum building opportunity to the Jets offense. That's it. Don't let Breece Hall get going. Attack Zach Wilson, confuse the hell out of him, but even forget that piece. Just don't turn the ball over and don't let their run game get going. That's it. Like, start there and you should be fine.
Yep. And both of those MetLife losses this year and last year, it's 3 interceptions from Josh that gives the Jets really good field position, lets them control the clock, lets them kick field goals, and you end up losing that game by, a possession. And it's infuriating to watch every time. But that's the Jets' MO because that's what they can do. They're good enough defensively. And I like that. We both have frogs in our throat this morning.
I don't know what the hell's going on. Yeah, it's like the temperature change. It's cold here today. And I was like, it's driving me nuts. I haven't been able to get it out for like 45 minutes.
Yeah. It's still in mind. You can hear it in my voice. I apologize, everybody. I tried doing a couple coughs before we went live, but when you see that in both games, like, that should just be enough of a tell that you got to take care of the ball. And what I really hope is that for this game, they do lean on the run a bit more and that it is a bit more consistent, because I think that given all of Cook's metrics and what you were seeing from him and Murray in the past 2 games, I think you'll have a lot more success if there's a threat of a run and a consistent use of it. So that's my hope from Joe Brady and co. But Anthony, that was our show today. You were an awesome guest as always. I truly appreciate you joining me, taking time out of your busy schedule. Let everyone in our chat know where they can find you and what you are all about.
You can find me on Twitter at pro__ant. It's pro 2_ANT. I am the host of Disguise Coverage, live every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And I'm also the co-host of the Cover One Film Room, live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Everything I do is all based on scheme and structure and game film and tape and analyzing the X's and O's and bones and structure of the Bills and football in general, and then pairing it together with advanced metrics and data to be able to put a complete and beautiful picture together, full of context. And that's me in a nutshell.
Full of context, yes. Well, if you guys haven't followed Anthony on Twitter, please do that, because if you want any sort of why explanation as to anything that happens with this team, especially from a schematic standpoint, he is the person to follow. Like, there's just always a good explanation. And after every loss, I always appreciate the tweet that just tells me, like, hey, there's 8 things wrong with this team right now. Because at the very least, it's like, all right, I can calm down and realize, like, it's a picture that's just way bigger than what I'm seeing. But Anthony, truly appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. For all of you in the chat that super chatted, that responded, commented to us, hated our takes, loved our takes, whatever it may be, I want to very, very, very from the bottom of my heart say, thank you so much. I appreciate you watching. Your view, your contributions, your engagement are everything to me and all of the people at this network. If you could please be as kind as to like this video on your way out, it will really, really help us all out, as well as all of the other great content on this network. If you're not watching the Film Room, Disguise Coverage, or any of our other great shows, you are missing out on some excellent Bills analysis that I think you guys should really, really check out. And I hope they get a win tomorrow. I hope the show is much more positive next weekend and that there is still some hope that this team can make it to the offs and that there's a little bit of something to smile about this upcoming week. But for all of you who joined us, if I don't see you before the holiday, have a great Thanksgiving, eat a lot of good food, pass out on the couch. Really, really hope that you enjoy the time with your family. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'm taking a page out of your book, Ant. And for everybody here at Cover One, happy holidays and go Bills. We will see you soon.